So you want to do research at a top university. I'm talking Harvard, Oxford, MIT, Stanford, ETH, Zurich, etc. But you look at your university's exchange portal and those names aren't there. So you think it's impossible, you think you need to be a genius or have a trust fund. You don't. There is a way. It's called the visiting student/researcher. I use this exact method to get into MIT. And this doesn't just apply to data science or purely tech fields. I've seen it work for mechanical engineering, medicine, chemistry, you name it. Whether you are writing code in a dry lab or mixing chemicals in a wet lab, there is a way. If you want to see what that life actually looks like, the campus, the people, the vibe, check out my other video I posted about how my time at MIT looked like. But if you want to know how to get there, we need a plan. I recommend you start this at least 6 to 12 months in advance to avoid total chaos. There are 2 ways to play this game: easy mode and hard mode. Easy mode is if you know people or are part of specific circles. Since I studied in Munich in Germany, I'll give you examples from here. We have programs like CDTM, Manage and More, TUM-AI, etc. These groups have somewhat of a pipeline to these top universities. Getting into these initiatives requires effort. You have to apply an interview usually. The idea is that since you've already been accepted into the organization, there's an established level of trust that helps make the study abroad possibility much more likely compared to applying on your own. Professors and labs start knowing these groups and that they have good students, so they trust the next referral. So if you have a group like this at your university, join it. But join because you also actually like it, not just for studying abroad. Now let's assume you don't have that. You are on hard mode. This is the self-organized route. It's a bit harder, it can be a bit more stressful, but it's not impossible. Here's the step-by-step system that I used. Step 1 is selection. Start by identifying universities that interest you, but don't just stop there. Look closely at the labs they host, and better yet, start from specific problems you find exciting or care about and find labs actively working on those. So here's a practical example. It can be as simple as going to Google Scholar, typing out a field you're interested in, for example, protein folding, ticking what has been published in the past year. You can simply click on a few links and simply look at the authors that have written this paper. And I'm just going to look up some of these authors of this specific paper. I see one of them, for example, here is at MIT Biology, and there's a link to the website, which is perfect, to the lab website. And you see there are different tabs, like the research, their publications, their contact details, and you can even look up, for example, the lab, so the people that are involved in this lab, and this is how you can get started. Geography can help narrow things down by domain. For example, the Bay Area tends to be a strong fit for entrepreneurship-driven research, while Boston, for example, has a deep concentration in pharma and biotech. So once you've identified a lab or professor, look them up on Google Scholar, take the time to read their recent papers. This will give you a concrete sense of what they actually work on. If you feel underqualified, consider taking a university course that gives you demonstrable relevant work. For example, a hands-on NLP course that requires a final report can function as a form of mini research if you are targeting natural language processing as a research area. If you've already completed research through a seminar or a bachelor's thesis on a topic related to the lab you're targeting, you're already on a strong path. You have concrete work to point to. If not, build a side project to prove you can do the work. For example, if you want to do computer vision, don't just list your coursework. It might be enough, but try to build a system that detects every time your cat jumps on the kitchen stove. Is it silly? Yes, but it shows you build things for fun, not just for grades. This can also give you a small edge. In practice, people often prefer working with a solid, reliable candidate who's pleasant to collaborate with over a technically stronger one who's difficult to work with. This is also some advice in general. Try to give your projects and applications a personal touch. That doesn't mean doing something flashy or unconventional just to stand out. Rather, weave in your genuine interests or problems you care about. People can usually tell when interest is authentic, and it often comes across naturally engaging when someone speaks about something they truly care about. And I think that can go a long way. Bonus tip, even if you aren't part of a student initiative or don't know certain people, doing strong work at university can be incredibly helpful. For example, a friend I met at MIT who came from ETH Zurich shared a story about their IKB, International Knowledge Base. They noticed a connection between a course they had just excelled in and the professor who collaborated with people in Boston in that field. And because they had performed well in the course, course, the professor was more inclined to establish a connection for them. You don't need a formal knowledge base to take advantage of this. Start by looking at your university's collaborations or networks. Sometimes similar resources exist. Otherwise, you can map it yourself, check which classes you're taking or want to take, identify the respective professors, and see who they are publishing with using platforms like Google Scholar or ResearchGate, etc. Strong work combined with awareness of these networks can open doors you might not expect. Again, trying to make this accessible for everyone and speaking from personal experience, let's assume you don't have the connections or aren't part of any specific circles. I personally was actually in a student initiative that could have made things easier, but I didn't realize it at the time. Looking back, it might have saved me some effort, but the silver lining is that I can share what I learned the harder way, so you don't have to go through the same trial and error. So once you've found a lab that feels like a good fit for you, let's move on to the next step. Step 2. Outreach. If you don't have a warm intro, you're going to cold email. You need to understand the trade. Research labs run on two things, funding and labor. You are the labor. And if you bring your own scholarships, you become free labor, which is easily the best value proposition for a lab. We'll talk about scholarship in just a minute, so hang tight. If they can pay you or waive some fees, that's great, but it ultimately depends on the lab's funding and resources. You can also try following the lab or researchers on social media if they have a presence, see if they're attending a conference or event nearby, and try to strike up a conversation. Some labs travel internationally quite often, so the opportunity to meet them in person could arise sooner than you might think. But in general, be aware, especially with cold outreach via emails. You will get ghosted, you will get rejected, but just send the well thought out email. It can be frustrating if they don't answer, but remember that timing and luck also play a role. The person you've reached out to could be going through a stressful period, or maybe they've already taken a bunch of visiting students and can't take more. There are countless possible reasons, so try not to take it personally. There are also many universities and labs out there, so it's not the end of the world if a specific plan doesn't come to fruition. And if it doesn't work out this semester, you can always try again next semester if you're set on a specific university or lab. This can be one of the harder steps, but if you follow the advice and give it a genuine try, it usually works out over time. Think about it. Every lab has more ideas and projects they'd like to pursue than they have time or resources for. Scarcity in economics 101 terms is basically that, limited resources versus unlimited wants. So if you can show that you can add value or demonstrate genuine motivation and interest, you're helping solve a problem they already have, and that makes it much more likely someone will eventually reply. Step 3. Money. Before we even talk about visas, we need to talk about funding. Rent in places like Boston, Zurich, or Palo Alto isn't just high, it's painful. You need funding. If you're in Germany, for example, a good place to start is the DAD. There are also many other possibilities. Try to combine as many as you can. For example, DAD used to have this IFI, I don't know how to pronounce it, IFI program for CS master students, but now it's mostly for PhDs. Programs and deadlines change, so you need to do your own research for your specific time frame. Planning ahead can help you maximize the number of scholarships you're eligible for, ensuring your finances are covered. Don't forget your university's resources. For example, TUM offers Promos, Erasmus Plus, and several other programs. Apply for these as soon as you have a positive response from a lab. Ideally, ask the lab to provide an invitation or confirmation if they don't handle funding themselves. This can sometimes be a chicken and egg problem. Labs, university offices abroad usually want to see that you have funding before they process official paperwork, but you often need their confirmation to apply for funding. So try to secure both as early as possible. Be aware of specific requirements. These are usually publicly available, so I won't waste too much time on them, since this video will already be quite long. For example, MIT's International Students Office, or ISO, provides detailed pages on expected living costs and funding requirements. Keep in mind that this can differ from university to university. Sometimes the lab will pay you, but assume they won't. It's rare, especially with recent grant cuts and a more conservative economy. From personal experience, most PIs won't start the official process until they know you have funding. I just realized I didn't explain what PI is throughout this video. It stands for Principal Investigator, so think of it as the professor or lead researcher leading research projects, grants, or even a whole lab. It's a matter of time, resources, and commitment. They don't want to start a process only to have to stop it because funding isn't secured. Some labs may be more flexible, but in my case, funding was a necessary prerequisite. Remember, it's much better to find a lab and PI who are good people and genuinely supportive. By now, you've probably noticed that doing this kind of research abroad requires extra effort and organizational overhead compared to just doing a thesis or research in general at your home university. There will inevitably be hiccups along the way, and having someone who supports you makes all the difference. A lab that looks better on paper, be it prestige, success, whatever metric you choose, won't help much if the PI or lab members don't have time for you. I've also talked to PhD students and they always say the supervisor matters more than the topic itself. When you think about it, it actually makes sense. They define the trajectory, the expectations, and challenges you'll face. Use the responses you get from labs or your calls with PIs to get a sense of their approach and personality. If they're approachable and supportive, they're also more likely to connect you with current and former students who can help. Often the attitude of the PI sets the tone for the entire lab, so a good PI usually means a good environment overall. Step 4. Co-supervision. If you want this research to count as your thesis, you'll need a co-supervisor at your home university. This can be tricky. You'll need to balance the expectations of your home professor with those of your host lab. Ideally, both supervisors get along well, or your home university professor trusts that you're in good hands. In practice, the host lab PI usually sets the direction and has more control over the project, while your home supervisor provides guidance and oversight. If you can't find a home supervisor right away, don't panic. You can often start the research first and sort out the thesis paperwork later, or simply treat it as a research internship to gain experience. The experience itself is the real asset, the credits are mostly formalities. You can also begin the project during your stay and continue the writing after you return, potentially finding a supervisor at that point. Of course, the earlier you have a home co-supervisor, the better, especially if both supervisors are aligned. That way you won't end up in awkward situations trying to satisfy two conflicting directions. This may sound intuitive, but it's easy to forget that your goals and the lab's goals aren't always exactly the same. Your target lab usually doesn't care whether the work counts as a bachelor's or master's thesis back home or how many credits you're getting for it. They care about the research itself. Labs often aim to publish in specific venues, and those papers are usually much shorter, sometimes under 10 pages, while your thesis can easily be 5 times longer. That's fine, just focus on the research while you're abroad and later use your thesis to include more comprehensive details. Ironically, it took me more time to find a home university co-supervisor than a PI abroad. It does take some effort and emailing, but it's usually easier since by that point you already have a direction and a lab. It's mostly about getting someone on board from your home university. I was just a bit unlucky with timing. Some professors were in busy periods or didn't have the bandwidth. It's another reminder of why planning early is so crucial. The good thing is that you usually have some flexibility. You can often choose from multiple professors to be your home co-supervisor that ultimately grade you. You can decide based on courses or lectures you've taken with them or from your research into their interests and work. Professors at your home university who already collaborate with other universities abroad are often more open to this kind of arrangement. Bringing in a new lab can add another potential connection for them in the future, making it mutually beneficial. At the end of the day, it's a win-win. They gain a new international connection, networking opportunities, and possibly even publications, while you get the guidance and support you need. Step 5 is the bureaucracy. Again, having a supportive lab goes a long way. Talk with current or past students if you can. This process can be riddled with organizational overhead, so the more responsive and helpful your PI and their admin staff are, the better. Once you have the invite and the funding, the next step is the visa. Unless, of course, you're somehow magically exempt because your great aunts, cousins, step siblings, neighbors, goldfish is from that country and got you a passport, in which case, congratulations, you're one of the lucky few. If you're going to the US, for example, this is usually the J1 visa. Check your target country for the equivalent. At MIT, for example, there's a structured process with what they call the 120-day rule. In short, sometimes you need to prove your English proficiency, be it TOEFL, IELTS, or even a bachelor's thesis in English. A supportive PI can advise what worked in the past. The appointment process can take up to 120 days from when MIT's ISO receives the requirement application documents. Here's a very condensed version of what happens at MIT. Again, other universities vary, but the principles can be similar. Your PI or their administrative assistants completes required forms like the visiting student mentoring plan for stays that are longer than 5 weeks, English proficiency assessment form for international students, and department invitation letter using the ISO template. All forms are then submitted via MIT's visiting student request form online, and then the EAPS education office processes everything through MIT's visiting student portal, which then starts the ISO process, will ultimately give you the document you need, the DS 2019. I'll give you some practical tips from experience. Check embassy wait times immediately. In my case, I was working in Gdańsk, Poland at the time and had to take PTO just for a 10-minute interview in another city. The wait time in Warsaw was 2 weeks. Even if they return your passport quickly, plan at least 1.5 to 2 months as a buffer. Things can always take longer. Also, I saw online some countries like Colombia can take months, so plan accordingly. I am usually super unlucky with paperwork, so yeah, I planned quite a lot of buffer, but again, it can be very individual. I wonder why I always have problems. I mentioned the visiting student portal at MIT, and this is pretty structured there. Once your PI starts the process, you get access to a visiting student portal, an MIT email, checklists, and guidance. Supportive PIs and exchange offices can save you a lot of back and forth, but try to figure things out on your own first before bothering them. Ideally, the lab or exchange office has everything documented. Most things are written somewhere, so just look in multiple places before reaching out. If you're a good software engineer, aka pro at Googling and finding things, then you will certainly be good at this. Once everything is approved in the portal, you will receive the DS 2019 or other relevant paperwork depending on visa and country, etc., which you take to the embassy to get your visa stamped. At MIT, portal steps took me 1 to 2 months, and embassy appointments plus processing took another 1 or 2 months. The key takeaway: bureaucracy takes time. So plan early, be patient, and lean on your lab support. Conclusion: as you can see, this path comes with a lot of overhead. I personally planned it a year in advance. It takes discipline and staying on top of things, but if you've already completed a few semesters at university, I believe you have what it takes to manage it. I recently shot a video with one of my lab mates about his journey. My friend Pedro, who I interviewed on this channel, he went from Portugal to MIT, and he shared insights on what worked for him to land opportunities at not only MIT, but also Google and Meta at just 23 years old. Truly a case of suffering from success. Just kidding, check it out if you want some extra inspiration. Similarly, you could also apply to universities such as RWTH Aachen or TUM in Germany, as well as excellent institutions in East Asia like Tsinghua University, NUS, or the Sky Universities in Korea, for example, or even places like Australia, for example, the University of Melbourne or ANU. Each option comes with its own nuances, and I spoke about going from Munich to Boston, since that's what I did, but the overall process is largely similar. You can also factor in things like research duration, timelines, cost of living, and the resources available to you when making your decision. I've linked many of the resources mentioned down below, and I'll answer all the reasonable questions in the comments. I hope this guide helped. If it did, drop a like and subscribe. It helps massively, and let me know what else you'd like to see in the future. Good luck, and see you in the next one.